to ask questions, please. It's what we commonly refer to as a comms check. Okay, we've had no one go on. I have a couple of reps who are en route right now, so we won't hold the meeting, but we'll go ahead and get started. I have one walking in now. All right. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order this morning. Welcome back to our first regular meeting of the Legislative Modernization Committee in our regular room, as a matter of fact. Hope and trust that everyone had a very nice and safe long weekend. I know it's been a little cold. And I would like to start off this meeting, if we could, by please, let's go to the gallery. And we have a distinguished guest with us here today that is a fixture in the committee. Mr. Tom Day, would you please come up, state your name for the record? Introduce yourself and let us know who you are.
I must be in trouble, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tom Day. I'm Director of Legislative Administrative Services and here to help as well as all the other legislative agencies that are involved as well.
All right, y'all, you know Mr. Day, he runs an excellent staff at Legislative Assistant Services upstairs, so if you have any qualms or issues about how things are going here in the building, that's your first line of defense. Committee, I'd like to take your attention before we get really started into today's briefings, and let's take a look at, we have the House Committee rules, is that right? Has that been distributed to everyone? The rules? Okay, too easy. If you can take a look in front of you, you see a sheet of paper, it says House Committee Rules. This is the set of the rules that are proposed to be in effect for this committee. And until we adopt these rules, which we will probably be doing in the forthcoming meeting, the current rules that are on the books from last session are still in effect. I want you to take a look at those, and if you have any feedback, any suggestions, please bring them before the committee at the appropriate time. And it's a two-page document, front and back, 1 through 23. Please make sure that your version has that included. Now, and at this time, I'll open for questions. Representative Riley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted a clarification on number 9 there. So if our office staff, office assistants were to come up and bring us some information or an update or something, are they included in that under legislative staff?
I would, you said that is your office assistant? I would imagine that because they're employed by Mr. Day, they would be considered legislative staff. So they are covered. Scan in the room, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I saw an earlier, I think there's a later, excuse me, I think there's a later version of this. It seems like they added on number 20. I think this was the first draft I saw. I think, but anyway, I was looking on email quickly and I didn't find it, but I think there may be a revised draft where they said, they added on the front that it's up to the chair to allow members to participate via WebEx, but I'll look for that. But anyway, that's.
Okay, and you may be correct on that. I don't know if there's another version. There are about 4 or 5 different variants that have been flying around as people have been giving feedback. I know we will verify that this is the latest version. I think that to your question on number 20, the final sentence, chairs are allowed to hold a committee meeting by live video conference, meaning WebEx or whatever the tool is. I don't know if that was the remedy that they placed for that. So we can check on that as well. Thank you for that. Do you have any other questions at this time? Okay. Seeing none, let's open up here in the interest of time. I don't want to hold anyone in case they're in the committee. I was remiss to ask, are there any requests for bill introduction by this committee? And I will start with our gallery members. Anyone? Seeing none, any of the committee members request for bill introductions? Seeing none, okay. One other little piece of housekeeping back here. I want to see who is it that we actually have in the gallery today. We have a couple of visitors. If you would like to come up and introduce yourselves, the committee would be most pleased to know what organizations you represent or individuals. Just come on up to the mic, please. If you could state your name for the record and let us know who you are and who you represent. Thanks.
Curtis Gregory, representing Kansas Farm Bureau, and I believe that's what most of us are here for or with. If you want them individually to stand up, I can make some high schoolers come up and talk to the mic, because then we got proof for their parents.
I am so tempted.
Appreciate your.
Thank you so very much. We love the Farm Bureau. Thank you so much for being here. Great, fantastic organization. Look like you have a great group of young individuals out there. We look forward to meeting you all today under your dome here in your house. Today is your day. So we congratulate you on being up here and let us know how we can help you. Thank you for that, sir. Yes, sir. Let's see. Now I think we have on the agenda one of our other pieces of opening housekeeping so that we know how to run a little piece of business. It'll be a discussion of the CORA rules by the one and only. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gordon Self, Revisor of Statutes. I'm going to make a couple preliminary remarks, and then Adam Siebers from my office I brought will go over some more fine-tuning. And there's a memo from my office that you can refer to as we go through this discussion. Suffice it to say, as you all know, CORA applies to this committee and its deliberations, and any subcommittees that would happen to be appointed by the chair. It can be, for some of us that aren't familiar with it, it can be a little bit, let's say, daunting sometimes with all the different rules and different requirements. But suffice it to say that the House rules and the standard operating procedures that the House follows through its rules or custom and precedent are designed to meet and even supersede the requirements under CORA. So that's, to some extent, as long as we're following those rules and procedures, for the most part, we're in good shape in terms of complying with the law. Obviously, there's complicating issues that aren't specifically dealt with in our rules. And so Adam's going to go over some of those specifics with regard to the operation of the committee. But suffice it to say that, you know, that following the standard rules is a very good protective measure to make sure that we are complying with the law. If there is a COMA question throughout the session, individually or as a committee, feel free to ask me, and I'd be glad to advise you as we go. And with regard to CORA, if the committee receives a CORA request or you receive a CORA request individually, immediately touch base with me and I can advise you on how to respond to that. And all of you keep in mind that a CORA, when you receive a CORA request, or if the committee does, there's a 3-day response period that needs to be met. And so it's imperative that if you do receive a CORA request, that you contact me as soon as possible. So with that, I'm going to have Adam go over the memo and go over some of the specifics, and feel free to ask Adam questions as he goes through his presentation, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Self. Your expertise is always very much relished, and we are very happy that you're a member of this committee. Ms. Siebers, thank you so much for your help on the off-season. You're a legend in your own right. Please state your name for the committee, and let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Adam Siebers with the Office of Revisor of Statutes. As Gordon stated, I'm here to do a short discussion of the core and COMA impact essentially on this committee and on members of the legislature. As Gordon stated, if any of you have questions on COMA, especially CORA, or you receive requests, please bring them to our attention as timely as possible, because there is, like you said, the 3-day rule for CORA to respond by, and that's a firm 3-day rule. So it's as urgently as you can. If the question or issue arises, please bring it to a member of our office. Getting into the memo, which should have been distributed to all of you. This is a fairly standard memo. You may have seen this in other committees. I'm going to go through it for members who have not, though. Starting with the Kansas Open Meetings Act, which is also referred to as COMA. Generally, that's how most people refer to it, as COMA. This applies to legislative and administrative bodies and supporting bodies. The COMA generally applies to the Kansas legislators, committees, and subcommittees, unless a House or Senate rule would create an exception. Under COMA and what it requires, COMA requires essentially 2 things: that meetings be open to the public, where public has access to the meeting, and 2, the notice of the meeting must be provided if such notice is requested. For legislative meetings, the committee chair usually designates to the committee assistant to provide notice to individuals who have requested such notice. Under COMA, it's interpreted broadly as part of the statute, and if a question arises, the Attorney General and the District Attorney both have jurisdiction to investigate issues. Getting kind of into the nuts and bolts of COMA, an important question under COMA is determining if a meeting exists. Under COMA, a meeting would exist, or a meeting means any gathering or assembly via any method of interactive, which is 2-way communication. This would include electronic communication, or that occurs at any location or social situation involving a majority of the voting members for the purpose of engaging in a discussion, which is a 2-way dialogue, about the business of the body. Kind of a subsequent concern of meetings would be a serial communication where you unintentionally create a meeting, and this would include a meeting of interactive communications in a series, which are not contemporaneous, if the communications collectively involve a majority of the membership, share a common topic of discussion concerning the business or affairs, and are intended by any participant, even just one, to reach an agreement on a matter that would require binding action to be taken by the body. As I stated, interactive communication could include any form of communication, and the consequences of interactive communications constituting a meeting under COMA is that no notice is provided and the meeting is not open to the public. A few common COMA issues that arise are social events or travel are generally not considered meetings if business is not discussed by a majority of the members of the body. However, you should always be aware of potential appearances of COMA violations and should be considered when attending such events. Attending an educational convention or listening in a meeting of another body is not a meeting if no discussion involving a majority of the members of the body's business occurs. And social media or email interactions may constitute a meeting. A one-way email, generally would not. We always recommend warnings not to reply all, or even BCC members, so that way they can't unintentionally reply all to emails, which could trigger a COMA issue. Discussions solely limited to planning when and where to meet is not considered a meeting under COMA. However, further discussions concerning potential agenda items may be considered a meeting. And then lastly, one thing to consider is that informal discussions before, during, or at recess of a meeting could constitute a meeting if the other qualifications of a meeting would exist, meaning, more than the majority of the body and things like that. First COMA requirement, which ensuring that a meeting is open. Open means reasonably accessible to the public. Most of the meetings in the Capitol have no issue with that. Meetings are generally always open. A prior agenda may be changed at the meeting. If a change to the agenda is anticipated, we always recommend best practices to note such possible change on the agenda or issue a revised agenda. Recording or videotaping is generally allowed, subject to reasonable rules. There's no requirement under COMA that the public be permitted to speak at a meeting or participate. And COMA does not require minutes except for in executive sessions. Under kind of the second main rule or requirement under COMA, it would be providing notice. Notice of the meeting, which is the date, time, and location of a meeting, must be provided upon request to the requester. As stated before, an agenda is not required under COMA, but must be provided, must be made available if requested. The person presiding over the meeting has a responsibility of providing notice. However, they may delegate this to staff members. And notice should be reasonable in manner and timing under the circumstances. It's kind of a fact by case basis. You know, as under the legislator, things are fairly time sensitive, so and aren't always known. So it's the general rule is that it's reasonable under the circumstances. Moving on to the application of the Kansas Open Records Act, or KORA. This is the statutory act that requires public records of public agencies to be open for inspection. Essentially, KORA applies to public agencies under the definition. This committee and any subcommittees from this committee fall under the definition of public agency. However, as I note later, personal records of members of the legislature are not considered public records under KORA. So there is a distinction between committee records and individuals' legislators' records. Responding to a KORA request, pursuant to KORA, public records are required to be provided or made available for inspection in response to a request for such records. These requests are generally made to the official custodian who is responsible for the maintenance of the public records, and that a response must be made within 3 business days of receipt of the request. As Gordon stated earlier, if any of you receive a KORA request, please bring it to our attention as we help prepare responses, lawful responses to KORA requests. Moving on to records required to be disclosed. According to KORA, all public records shall be open for inspection unless otherwise provided. There's an exception that would apply. And that public record means any recorded information regardless of form. So it's a pretty broad characteristic of what is a public record. Of course, there are certain exceptions that do apply that could allow for not having to disclose certain records. As I stated earlier, public records do not include records that are made, maintained, or kept by individual members of the legislature. However, generally, records of the legislative committees, which could include testimony, handouts, proposed amendments, are deemed public records once such record has been distributed to a majority of the members of the committee. And once the majority of the members have access to such record, that generally triggers that record to be a public record. Moving on to COMA and KORA enforcement. Certain enforcement mechanisms under KORA and COMA. Members who knowingly violate the provisions may be subject and individually subject to a payment penalty, civil penalty not to exceed $500. There's also provisions under both COMA and KORA that the Attorney General may settle issues by entering into a consent order, and that the district attorney and Attorney General also have authority to investigate and issue training requirements if they find such violation. And if there are any additional questions, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Siebers. That was quite expansive, and I appreciate both the amount of detail and the handout that you've gone over with us at this time. Do we have any questions from members of the committee? Okay. Representative Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you introduced Gordon Self as well as Tom Day, you know, these guys are great resources. And I want to ask maybe the question, I'm not sure if it's to Adam or to Gordon, but, you know, I've listened to these every year I've been here because we go through them at the beginning, and KORA and COMA were kind of terms in the beginning, and then you kind of understand. But there's always history to this kind of stuff. It's very specific. So just to add a little color commentary, I mean, was there behavior in the past, or are these just kind of boilerplate things that all states have in terms of their legislative affairs being very open to the public and discoverable, or is there a history in Kansas that this was all enacted as a response to something? I was always curious. Thank you.
Mr. Siebers. Oh, Mr. Self, please.
I believe that the Coracoma statutes were enacted just as part of a general, the general view that the proceedings of public bodies should be open, both from the standpoint of meetings and conducting their business, and from the standpoint of the records that are a part of the public agency should be made public. I think it's that rather than any specific concerns. Obviously, over the years, there's been changes, you know, to the act, and there's been interpretations by the Attorney General and the court system to try to fine tune. The language is fairly general, and so often specific interpretations are necessary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just kind of curious what gave rise to them. If we were unique, but it sounds like it's fairly general stuff. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. May I pepper you with a couple myself?
Absolutely.
I'm messing with you. I'm not going to ask you any questions. Thank you. Okay, committee, you now see that we have our briefing on open meetings and Open Records Act and requests. We understand what the standards are by the committee. Having no questions, I presume that you all have, you feel comfortable with the information. If you ever have a question, please reach out to Mr. Self or to Mr. Siebers. Definitely Mr. Self, as he is the lead on this and serves on this committee. What I would like to do is also note, if we may, the calendar as it's coming up. Today is the 22nd of January. Just for the committee members to know, if you weren't tracking, next week on the 27th, which is our next meeting time, Monday, it is the last day for individual members to request the revisor's office to draft member-sponsored bills. We are moving fast, and it feels like you don't have a chance to stay abreast of what's happening here in the session. But I do want to bring that up to everyone's attention. If you have a bill that you would like to have the revisor's draft for you, and it's an individual sponsored bill, you need to make that request by the 27th. And looking at the rest of the calendar going into February, which is the following week, the 3rd of February, which is the following Monday, is the last day for non-exempt committees to request those bill drafts, which this committee is one of the non-exempt committees. We are not exempt from the timeline and schedule. Why do I say that? When we open up for bill requests, the window is closing quickly. If you care to have any bills introduced, that is the time to make those things happen. At this time, I would like to open the floor to our ranking member because I know that we had a couple of individuals on our last meeting from your caucus that weren't available to introduce themselves, but if you'd like to call on them to be introduced, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those of you that were out last week and had replacements, and we'll start here with Representative Oropesa.
Hello, I am Representative Melissa Oropesa from Wyandotte County, District 37.
And I'm so sorry, Representative Oropesa, I was unclear, and that's my fault. If you could let the committee know not only your name and district, but also how long have you been with the committee or in the legislature as well, just the getting to know your first day of school type of stuff. Thank you.
Okay, so I was on this Legislative Modernization Committee for my first term, and this is the beginning of my second term.
And we'll move around the room. Who else wasn't here? I know that Representative Simmons was out. She had a replacement in last week as well.
Hello, my name is Alexis Simmons. I represent District 58 here in Topeka, and this is my first term and my, of course, first time on this committee.
Am I missing any other? Representative Weichel, were you?
I was here last week, but I'll reintroduce myself. Representative Weichel, District 10 in Lawrence, and this is my first term.
I'd also like to make this brief announcement, and no offense to my colleagues on the other side, but those representatives, including myself, that just introduced themselves are probably some of the best in the building.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rankin. Go Chiefs. There are a lot of people out there that don't feel that way, right? I don't know. Why they cry? Why they cry? I don't know. But let's see. Now that we've gotten those introductions, do we have anybody from our side? Oh, Rep. Schreiber, I believe. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Schreiber, District 60, which is primarily Emporia in Northwest Lyon County. Been here since, serving on this committee since it started a couple years ago, and this is my 9th year in the legislature. And before that, I was a lobbyist in this building for quite some time, so I know where all the doors are. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You know where all the doors are. He taught me where all the bathrooms are. I want to. And I thank all of you for your patience on last week. Many of us were on the same committee, so we were double tapped for a number of things. So I just wanted to make that opportunity for us to get to know each other here as a committee. Let's see. One of the other things, now that we've talked about that, I want to make one last call for bill introductions. Requests for bill introductions. Do we have any from the gallery? Please. Well, hold 1 second. Please make sure that mic is on, and can you state your name so that the team can record it appropriately, sir?
Curtis Gregory from Columbus. So the question didn't come up until the COMA discussion. Is what you guys are discussing and passing out just for legislature here in the building? Or does that relate down to other local government entities that try to practice underneath COMA, COA, as well as Executive Sections Act? The second part of that I have is, I did hear, you know, the penalties or what to do if such occurs, because I was in that situation where they were all broken, but yet there was nothing laid out in what to do. So part of your discussion was, okay, it came up because the past, so now we need to try to prevent the future happening, or the past happening in the future. So
I can sir, thank you so much for that question. I can totally appreciate that. I know that there were discussions of some similar types of things happening in the aftermath of that. This is something that we go over here in the legislature to govern ourselves, but I'll let Mr. Siebers, if that's all right, answer the question that you've posed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the enforcement provisions, you know, complaints can be made, of course, to the DA or the AG if anyone ever feels that a COMA or CORA issue has been, you know, possibly violated. Civilians also have the ability to bring causes of action under COMA and CORA. So those are kind of the enforcement mechanisms. In regards to COMA and CORA application, yes, it applies to local bodies throughout the state. It's a pretty broad statute applying to essentially all governmental entities, legislative bodies that have decision-making authority. The legislature is a little unique where there are certain exclusions that apply to the legislator, but for the most part, the CORA and COMA applies uniformly throughout the state.
Okay, and sir, I hope that answers your question. It sounds like COMA CORA being, you know, something that governs from the state applies across the state on every echelon as well. Let's see, at this time I would like to ask Ms. Diane a quick question. Okay, the minutes from the last meeting, where are they located? Okay, okay. Okay, fantastic. Team, I would like for you to take a look at the drive and find the minutes from the last meeting and this meeting. We will be moving to whether or not you have questions to approve those minutes as well. and any other correspondence that we may be dropping into the drive so that we can conduct efficient meetings. That said, having no other business, any last call? Having no other business, we are adjourned. Thank you.